It's spring 1735 and Dick Turpin, butcher,
Thank you, Sam.
house raider
Surprise and terror, those were our tactics.
and torturer.
And then they threw me on the fire.
Threatened, yes, but we never done it.
Is about to embark on the career he's most famous for, highway robbery.
Stand and deliver. I coined that phrase, you know, and you know what?
What?
They always did, every last bleeding one of them.
The mid-18th century was the heyday of the stagecoach, and it was the transport of the rich. For example, in Dick Turpin's time, you could get a ticket from Hereford to London for about £1.55. That might sound cheap, but an average-size house in Hereford would cost you £5 a year to rent. So these people had a bob or two about them.
And they were so easy to rob. Trotting along at around 6 miles an hour, you could jog alongside one if you wanted.
But you forget one thing. Them coves in the stagecoaches come all prepared like. A pop from one of these will paint your prancer scarlet. So, we keep away from the coaches in the main.
But I thought that's what highwaymen did, rob stagecoaches.
Nah, the lonesome traveller, that's what you want. So you and your mate can outnumber 'em like 2 to 1, so to speak.
Sadly, it's true. Though the newspapers of the time are filled with his exploits as a highwayman, there are no actual reports of him ever holding up a stagecoach. A few horses and carts, maybe, but most of his exploits were common muggings for the average takings of a few shillings.
The first record we have of Dick Turpin, highwayman, comes from the London Post of the 10th of July, 1735, reporting a robbery on a Mr. Vane near Barnes Common. Then again, 4 days later, Dick Turpin is reported robbing a Mr. Omar of Southwark. With a break when Turpin is thought to have been in Holland, the robberies continued until 1737.
But then he and his new partner in crime, Matthew King, relieved one Joseph Major of his horse, a beautiful beast called White Stockings.
Stuck out like a sore thumb, that one. Should never have touched it. But old Matty never could resist a fancy nag, and that's what cost him. The twit.
White Stockings was tracked down to an inn on the King's Road by one Richard Bayes, who lay in wait for somebody to come and collect it.
It was King who arrived and Bayes jumped him. King pulled his pistol and fired, but Bayes had the measure of him.
Get him, Dick, or we're done!
The shot hit King, mortally wounding him.
To be fair to Dick Turpin, the fact that he shot his mate probably wasn't his fault. You see, the flintlock wasn't very accurate. If you're going to try to shoot anything over 20 yards, you're probably going to miss. And the reason is the barrel and the shot. You see, hear that? Rattling around down the barrel. So you see, these flintlocks are a bit of a hit and miss affair.
I knew he was going to get hurt, the tosser, but he asked me to shoot, and what can a poor cove do? Still, he set me up for my finest hour.
And what was that?
I rode Black Bess through the night and ended up in York before sunrise, 200 miles or more.
There's one problem with this rather romantic little tale. To make it up to York in a night, you'd have to ride at about 20 miles an hour non-stop. Now, I'm no expert, I don't claim to be, but horses aren't cars. You can't get in them and just drive all night. In fact, full tilt, you probably only get about 5 miles out of them. So where did this myth come from? Not from the pen of Dick Turpin, no. It came from this book, Rookwood, written by Harrison Ainsworth. This is him. the man who created the myth of Dick Turpin. Without him, the old thug would have been forgotten long ago. Written about 100 years after Turpin died, Rookwood is a real bodice ripper of a novel. Ainsworth took Turpin's name, but nothing more. Rather than a thug and a killer, the Turpin Ainsworth created is the dashing rogue on the all-conquering Black Bess, a totally fictional image which for some reason nearly everyone believes in.
So you know about the book, then?
Yes.
Still, can't blame a bloke for talking himself up, can you? Especially when it's all written down like. True enough, I never had an horse called Black Bess. I did ride to York, though, but it took a bit longer than what that bloke said when he wrote it down.
Maybe Dick's got a point. People need heroes, and that's what Ainsworth provided. It certainly struck a note with the public. 5 editions were printed in the first 2 years, and soon it was being published in French, German and Dutch. Within a few years, there was a whole Turpin industry which the great and good worried were promoting idleness, corruption and immorality. Whatever they were doing to young minds, few of the Dick Turpin tales told the true story of the pockmarked man in the three-cornered hat. The real truth is this. After Turpin had killed King, he fled and hid in Epping Forest, where a forester by the name of Thomas Morris tried to arrest him.
Turpin!
Sadly, it was the last thing that Morris ever did, as Turpin shot him dead.
Ticket to Paddington Fair, that was, so I piked it. Changed my name to John Palmer and headed up north. First to Lincoln and then on to York, where I got into the horse nipping game. Did all right for a while, taking the prancers in Lincolnshire and selling them in Yorkshire. But then, me luck turned sour.
Like his partner in crime, Samuel Gregory, Dick Turpin's demise began with one of these little beasts. And the story goes that Turpin, now living in York under the name of John Palmer, and his pals were returning empty-handed from a hunting trip. Not one to be defeated, Turpin decided to blast the brains out of his landlord's cockerel. When his landlord objected, Turpin said that he'd do exactly the same to him. As a result, Turpin spent his first night in jail. Once behind bars, things began to go wrong. It didn't take the authorities long to finger him for horse stealing, but they thought they were holding John Palmer and not Dick Turpin. And then in February 1739, he wrote a letter to his brother-in-law, Pompey Riverall, and that was to seal his fate.
Dear Pompey, a word from you would mean a great deal.
In those days, horse stealing was one of the 200 capital offences, but if you had a good character reference, one of those, he's a good boy and he'll not do it again type of things, then there was an 80% chance that instead of the noose, the judge would award you with a one-way ticket to America. But it was not to be. For whatever reason, Turpin's brother-in-law refused to accept the letter when it was delivered, and as a result, it ended up in a post office in Saffron Walden, where it was seen by one James Smith, who was at school with Turpin and had taught him how to write. The chances of this happening must have been 1,000,000 to 1, but it did. As soon as Smith saw the writing, he ripped the letter open, knowing it must have been from Turpin. A bit of a stroke of luck for the magistrates, but a major downer for Turpin, who, a few days later, found himself looking into the eyes of his old schoolmate.
Hello, Smithy.
That's him.
And his fate was sealed. Suddenly, finding they had Dick Turpin sitting in York jail caused a few problems for the authorities. Logically, they should have taken him down to London and tried him there as Dick Turpin and showed him the old nasty rope trick. But, after a lot of umming and ahhing, they decided to try Dick Turpin in York, which came as a bit of a shock for old Dickie boy. According to the transcripts of the trial, when asked why he should not be hanged, all the gormless idiot could come up with was that "It is very hard on me, my lord, because I was not prepared for my defence." The judge did ask of him, "Why was he not?" To which Turpin did reply, "Several persons who came to see me assured me that I would be removed to Essex to be tried, for which reason I thought it needless to prepare witnesses for my defence."
Defence or not, the evidence was clear. John Palmer, alias Dick Turpin, was sentenced to death on the 22nd of March, 1739, aged just 35. The last 2 weeks in the condemned cell in York Prison giving a hint of the notoriety to come.
Half a shilling less?
It's claimed the jailer made £100 selling drink to Turpin and his admirers, women being especially keen to pay him a visit.
Hello, love. Want to tell the kiddies you had a wriggle on old Dickie? Come on, dearie, raise your belly cheeks.
But soon the fun was over as Turpin climbed the ladder to the gallows. It's said that he was calm as he stamped down one foot to stop his leg shaking uncontrollably just before he was turned off.
But Turpin didn't rest in peace. At 3 o'clock in the morning, a few days after the hanging, the local surgeon, a chap called Marmaduke Palms, pitched up at the grave intent on getting a cheap cadaver for dissection. But Turpin had outwitted him. With his last few shillings, he had a guard placed on his grave, and Palms was beaten off. If it wasn't for Harrison Ainsworth and his book, that would have been the last we'd have heard of Dick Turpin. Instead, he lives on as a bunch of myths, half-truths, and a lot of pub signs.
So there you have it, Dick Turpin, common thug, torturer, and responsible for at least 2 people's murders. Not the sort of person you'd like to meet when you're out walking your dog.
At least gents is going to be talking about me in 300 years' time. Unlike you.
So many more rogues for Vic to meet here on Discovery Channel. And, shiver me timbers, he's in the gallery with the pirate, Blackbeard, next.